My name is Sarah Mitchell. At 32, I'm the youngest partner at a top sustainable architecture firm. Tonight, my father, Richard Mitchell, billionaire founder of Mitchell Corp, is retiring. 200 guests are applauding. My brothers stand beside him on stage. And me, I'm sitting at table 19, alone. Then I hear it. I owe everything to my sons, my father says into the mic. And after a pause, he adds, my daughter never had what it takes for real business. The crowd laughs politely. Something inside me shatters. I reach into my bag and clutch a box, my final gift to him. I rise from my seat, and in that moment, I know. When he opens this box, everything will change, especially him. The ballroom smelled like money, soft florals, polished silver, and quiet ambition. Everyone seemed to belong. Everyone except me. My name tag read Sarah Mitchell, table 19. Table 19 was near the kitchen doors, tucked beside a floral column. Not the family table, not the board's table, just out of the way. I walked past the stage where James and Thomas were helping my father with the mic. They looked natural, comfortable, like they were born for it. My tote bag felt heavier as I slid into my seat. Inside, it wrapped in silver paper, was a gift that had taken me a lifetime to prepare. As applause echoed through the room, I watched my father laugh with CEOs and governors. No one greeted me. No one asked what I'd been building, but that was okay. Tonight, I wasn't here to be included. I was here to be seen. My father took the stage like it was his boardroom. Confident, polished, untouchable. He spoke of building Mitchell Corp from nothing. The audience hung on every word. He named every major milestone, every key partnership. He named my brothers James and Thomas his greatest accomplishments. Their faces lit up. Mine burned. I waited for my name, a glance, anything, but it never came. Not in the speech, not in the slideshow. I was erased. Not forgotten, just never included. Even now, after all I'd built, I was still that girl in the corner. The one who made things that didn't count. I looked down at the silver box beside me. My hand brushed the ribbon. Not yet, I thought, but soon. Let him have his applause. When the clapping stops, he'll finally hear me. I was 8 the first time he dismissed me. Sunday dinner, linen napkins, roast chicken. James and Thomas were talking business with Dad, just kids themselves, but he treated them like protégés. I had studied a term I'd read in his magazine, inventory turnover. I waited for a pause, then asked what it meant. He laughed. Why don't you help your mother with dessert, sweetheart? This is business. The room didn't fall silent, but something inside me did. I smiled like it didn't matter, but it did. That night, I drew my first building. Not for praise, not to prove anything, just to remember who I was before I felt small. Mom found the sketch later and framed it. Dad never saw it. Or maybe he did and chose not to look. Mom taught literature before she became a full-time mother. She traded lecture halls for lullabies, essays for evening tea, but she never stopped being a woman who believed in stories, especially mine. While Dad taught the boys to calculate margins, she helped me build cities out of cardboard and glue. She'd kneel beside me on the floor for hours. Your father builds what people use, she whispered. You build what people feel. She never called it art. She called it architecture. When she got sick, I brought my models to her bedside. She still smiled, still gave notes, until she couldn't. At her funeral, I heard Dad tell his brother, at least the boys will carry on the business. That's what matters. I didn't cry at that. I just folded a paper house that night and wrote her name on the roof. After Mom died, the house changed. It wasn't just quieter, it was colder. Dad didn't speak much, and when he did, it was about stocks, projections, performance. He filled the silence with numbers. I filled it with sketches. Whole nights passed in my room drawing towers, bridges, homes with skylights and hidden gardens. Spaces I could breathe in. Spaces she might have loved. At dinner, James talked about finance. Thomas about supply chains. I said nothing. Dad never asked. He had 3 children, but only 2 he looked at when he spoke. I stopped showing him my models. I stopped waiting for him to notice. But every time he walked past without seeing me, I added another floor to the invisible city I was building, one he'd never stepped foot in. The envelope came on a Tuesday. Thick paper, gold crest, my name in bold. I had gotten an MIT, full scholarship. Architecture? I held the letter with both hands barely breathing. At dinner, I waited for the right moment. When I finally told them, James clapped. Thomas looked surprised. Dad sipped his wine. Then he said, "Drawing buildings isn't a real business." He didn't even look up. "It's glorified art. No Mitchell has ever been an artist." I laughed lightly, like it didn't hurt, but my hands were shaking under the table. Mom would have framed the letter. He pushed it aside with his plate. That night, I pinned it to my wall anyway, next to her framed sketch. A wall of things he'd never validate, but that still proved I was real. There were 3 moments I carry like scars. The first, age 12. My science fair project on sustainable materials won statewide recognition. Mom cheered through every photo. Dad skipped the ceremony for Thomas's JV basketball game. Thomas sat on the bench the whole time. The second, the funeral. Dad whispered to his brother, "At least the boys can carry the business." I was standing 10 feet away. The third, my MIT graduation. I gave the student address. Dad arrived late, missed the speech, and left before the cake was cut. Said James had a meeting with investors. It was a casual lunch with someone already on the payroll. He didn't forget me. He chose not to show up. That's the part that stays. The absence you can still feel even when the room is full. After graduation, everyone assumed I'd join Mitchell Corp. It was unspoken like gravity. Even the HR director emailed me a company badge before I accepted anything. Dad didn't ask if I wanted the job. He just said, "We'll find you a desk near marketing." I said no. Instead, I took an entry-level role at a firm called Foster Plus Lane. They designed green spaces, public housing schools that used solar power. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't corporate. But it was mine. Dad didn't argue. He didn't yell. He just smirked. "You'll be back in a year," he said. "When you're ready for a real job." I smiled, packed my own boxes, and walked out of his office feeling like I'd finally stepped into my own life. The office was small, 2nd floor above a bakery. The walls smelled like coffee and ambition. I started by shadowing senior architects, taking notes, fetching permits, but I listened, learned fast, and stayed late when no one asked me to. A year in, I pitched an idea, a public library redesigned with passive cooling and recycled materials. They said yes. I spent nights drafting, revising, obsessing over every line. When it opened, kids ran barefoot on the sunlit floors. Elders sat in quiet corners reading under skylights I had designed. It didn't make headlines, but it made something real, useful, beautiful, lasting. I sent Dad a photo of the ribbon cutting. He replied 2 days later, "Niece, looks clean." That was it. But it didn't matter, because for once I didn't need his voice to hear my own. The next project came fast, a waterfront redevelopment in a forgotten part of the city. Factories shut down, streets cracked, but I saw potential. I pitched a vision: homes, gardens, co-ops, solar roofs, a place built for people, not profit margins. Some called it naive, but the firm backed me. 18 months later, the lakefront commons opened, a mix of beauty and utility. The city called it a model for sustainable design. I was invited to speak at a global summit. A journalist called me the voice of the next generation. I didn't forward the article to Dad, didn't mention the award, but part of me still wondered if he'd seen it, if he'd finally paused long enough to realize I hadn't failed. I just stopped asking for permission. It came in the mail. Heavy cardstock, gold foil. The retirement of Richard Mitchell, founder and CEO of Mitchell Corp. Black tie optional, downtown, 3 weeks away. I stared at it over coffee fingers, tracing the embossed logo. The same logo on every binder he never let me touch. Across the table, Marcus looked up from his laptop. "You going?" I didn't answer right away. My stomach had already answered for me. Part of me wanted to throw it out. Another part couldn't stop reading it. His name was everywhere. Mine wasn't mentioned once. "It's just a party," I said finally, but we both knew it wasn't. This wasn't just a milestone, it was a spotlight, and even from the shadows I could feel its heat. Sophia didn't even let me finish the sentence. "He's going to make it about the boys. You know that, right? We were at our usual lunch spot." She stabbed her salad like it had personally offended her. "You don't owe him anything," she added. "I'm not going for him," I said. She raised an eyebrow. Didn't need to say more. That night, Marcus was gentler. He might never change, he said, setting down his tea, but if you go be clear with yourself why. I nodded, but the truth was slippery. Some part of me still hoped that maybe at the end of his empire he'd finally look up and see what he'd overlooked for so long. Hope is dangerous like that. Quiet, heavy, and hard to put down even when it's hurt you before. James called the next evening. His name flashed on my screen unexpected. We hadn't talked in months. We're putting together a tribute video, he said. Thought maybe you could send some old family photos, maybe write something about Dad. His voice was even polite, like we were co-workers, not siblings. I wanted to say no, to remind him I wasn't asked to help plan, but instead I found myself saying, sure. That night, I pulled down a dusty box from my closet. Inside, a photo of Dad teaching me to ride a bike. One from the middle school design contest. I won his smile, rare but real. I wrote 3 sentences about his determination, his work ethic, left out the rest. Some truths didn't belong in a tribute, even if they lived in every frame. What do you give a man who's already had everything except you? I walked through stores, picked up golf accessories, expensive pens. None of it fit. None of it said what needed saying. Days passed. Then I remembered the safety deposit box, Mom's, still in my name. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside a letter, her handwriting on the envelope. For Elizabeth, when she needs reminding of her worth. It held clippings from my childhood wins, photos of models I'd built, a letter full of belief. I read it twice. Then I knew what to do. I gathered my MIT Diploma License Awards press features, loaded a USB with a video titled, What It Takes My Career, My Voice, My Proof. I wrapped it all in silver paper, tied it with a navy ribbon. Carter Industries colors, and wrote, From your biggest failure? I stared at my closet for an hour. Nothing felt right. Too soft, too loud, too much like trying. In the end, I chose a navy suit. Sharp lines, clean cut. Architectural in its own way. Subtle details in the lapel and cuffs like the buildings I design, functional but with quiet flair. It wasn't about impressing him. It was about not shrinking. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who'd built something from nothing, just like he once had, but different. I placed the gift box in a tote bag, checked the video on the USB one last time, not for mistakes but for courage. This wasn't a costume. It was armor, and I was ready to walk into his kingdom on my own terms. The grand Lexington ballroom glowed with money, crystal chandeliers, white linen, every orchid in perfect symmetry. I arrived on time. No photographer looked twice. No one asked my name. Executives in tuxedos, clinked glasses, whispered behind smiles. Some faces I knew from childhood, Dad's golf partners, board members, old friends. Still doing that architecture thing, one said, martini in hand. Fascinating hobby. I smiled, tight, nodded, didn't correct him. At the head table, my brothers held court. James raised a glass when he saw me, like we were fine, like nothing was missing. Dad was in the far corner laughing with a group of Japanese investors. James said I should say hello. So I did. He turned, gave me a half hug. You made it, he said, eyes already moving past me. Then flat, finally dressing like a professional. I see. I smiled. Didn't flinch. Not anymore. The seating chart said everything. Dad at the center, James to his right, Thomas to his left, their wives beside them. I was at table 19, tucked near the exit sign, surrounded by second cousins and mid-level staff. A server placed lobster bisque in front of me. I didn't touch it. Couldn't taste through the tightness in my chest. My tote bag rested at my feet, the silver box inside. I could feel its weight more than ever. Around me, voices buzzed with polite excitement. People toasted, laughed, exchanged stories about Dad's legacy, how much he'd built, who he'd become. Not once did anyone ask what I'd been building. I folded my hands in my lap, straightened my spine. They had written me out of the story, but they didn't know I had brought the ending. The lights dimmed. A hush moved through the room, a screen lowered from the ceiling. Tribute time. Music swelled, bold, orchestral. Photos of Dad as a young man appeared, breaking ground on factories, shaking hands with governors, smiling beside giant machines he once designed. Then came the family section, Little League games, James's college graduation, Thomas cutting a ribbon at a new plant. They showed Dad between his sons, proud, centered, complete. Laughter echoed as the video rolled on. I waited for my turn, for a single frame. And there it was, a family photo from when I was 10. Before Mom got sick. Before I learned my place. No mention of my work, no glimpse of my name. It was like I'd stopped existing the day I chose a life outside his blueprint. And in that moment I understood this wasn't oversight. It was erasure. Dad stepped to the podium. The room lit up with applause. He straightened his tie, a signal. He was about to say something he considered important. 40 years, he began. From a single desk in Cleveland to offices in 12 countries. People nodded, smiled, admired. He spoke of risk, grit, vision, of building something from scratch. Then his voice softened, more personal. What I'm most proud of, he said, is the legacy I leave in my sons. He gestured to James and Thomas. They have what it takes: discipline, instinct, the will to lead. I held my breath, waited. Then he glanced in my direction. Unlike my daughter, he said, who chose a different path. Some people just aren't cut out for real business. The crowd shifted. Uncomfortable laughter. Eyes turned toward me. He kept talking, but I had stopped listening. Something in me finally cracked open. Applause followed his final words. Not for me. Never for me. I sat still as people rose to their feet, clapping for the great Richard Mitchell and his perfect sons. My hand slipped into the tote bag. Fingers closed around the silver box. My heart pounded steady and loud. I hadn't planned to speak, hadn't imagined a scene, but something inside me stood up before I could stop it. I rose, smoothed my jacket, lifted the box. The sound of my heels against the ballroom floor cut through the noise like glass breaking. Voices dimmed, heads turned. I walked toward the stage, each step fueled not by anger, but by the years he never saw me. He still held the mic, still wore the confident smile of a man in full control. He had no idea what I was about to give him. He saw me coming. His smile didn't falter at first. Then it twitched just slightly as he realized I wasn't coming to congratulate him. I stopped in front of the podium. He leaned down, mic still in hand. "Elizabeth," he said quietly, "this isn't the time." I looked him in the eye. "Congratulations on your retirement, Dad." My voice was calm, steady. "I brought you something." I held out the silver box. He didn't reach for it, so I placed it in his hands. "It's from your biggest failure," I said. "Open it when I'm gone." Then I turned, walked off the stage. No mic drop, no drama. Just the sound of silence, thick and total, as 200 people watched me leave and wondered what the hell was inside that box. The ballroom didn't breathe. No music, no clinking glasses, just quiet, the kind that follows something you can't unsee. I walked past the head table. James stared at his plate. Thomas shifted like he wanted to move but didn't. Past the executives, past the cousins who never asked what I did. Not one person stopped me. Not one word followed. I pushed through the double doors out into the lobby's softer light. Cool still. Finally still. My heels echoed against the marble floor as I made my way to the parking garage. Each step peeled away a layer of something old, something I didn't need anymore. At my car, I fumbled with the keys, sat behind the wheel, and then I cracked. Tears sharp and sudden from years of holding it all in, not from regret, but from release. I sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, forehead pressed against it like I could hold myself together. But I couldn't. Not anymore. The sobs came hard, not delicate, not cinematic, real, messy, loud. Tears for every time he looked through me, for every win he ignored, for the girl who kept hoping anyway. My chest hurt, not from sadness, but from the weight lifting. Like breaking open was the only way to breathe again. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Text from James. "What did you give him? Are you okay?" From Thomas. "Dad looks like he's seen a ghost. Call me." I didn't answer. Didn't even look twice. I just sat there empty and full at once, not sure if I'd broken something or finally made space for something new. Back in the ballroom, he stood alone at the podium, the silver box still in his hands. The mic was on. You could hear his breathing uneven, shallow. James approached quietly. "Dad, let's wrap the program," he whispered. But Richard didn't move. He started untying the navy ribbon slow, like it might explode. Peeling the silver paper, he found a plain white box. No logo, no title. He opened the lid. First my MIT diploma, framed clean, undeniable, then my license, the Hammond Award. Press clippings, financials, each item heavier than the last, then the USB, labeled in black ink, what it takes. He stared at it like it spoke. And finally, a small card. He read it silently. His hand trembled. His face changed. Not with pride, but with something closer to realization. He held the card like it might disappear. One line. My handwriting. No decoration, no signature. You built with steel and concrete. I build with vision and heart. Both require what it takes. I learned its strength by being your daughter even when you couldn't see my worth. Goodbye, Dad. He didn't speak, didn't move. The mic caught the quietest sound, his swallow sharp and dry. Around him, no one dared fill the silence. Not James, not Thomas, not the crowd still frozen by what they'd just witnessed. The applause was gone. The control was gone. All that remained was a man holding proof of everything he refused to see, and now he couldn't look away. He stood there, still holding the box as the ballroom lights shifted back on. No speech left, no closing words, just silence. James stepped forward, took the mic from his hands. "Thank you for joining us tonight," he said, voice too tight, smile too practiced. "The bar remains open. Please enjoy the dessert buffet." The band started playing again, too loud, too fast, like it could cover what had just happened. But it didn't. Guests returned to their tables, slowly glancing at the head stage where Richard sat alone. He didn't touch his drink, didn't speak to anyone, just unpacked the box again, item by item, as if each one asked a question he no longer had an answer for. In front of him, proof of a life he had never bothered to learn. Beneath the papers and awards, he found a yellowed envelope. The handwriting stopped him cold. Margaret, his late wife's name, soft script, familiar curves. He paused before opening it as if afraid of what she might still say. He unfolded the letter slowly. The room around him blurred. It wasn't long, just a page. She had written it years ago. For Sarah, for this moment, she wrote of pride, of faith in their daughter's fire, of the strength she saw taking shape long before anyone else noticed. "She'll go farther than your legacy," it said, "because she's building her own." He folded the letter with shaking hands, closed his eyes, and for the first time in his long calculated life, Richard Mitchell looked deeply unsure of what legacy truly meant. I didn't answer any calls, didn't open the voicemails piling up from my father. 7 of them, all from unknown numbers, all after midnight. I buried myself in work client meetings, drafts, site visits, grateful for concrete and deadlines, things that held still, things I could shape. The story spread fast. Someone had recorded the gala. People whispered in elevators, paused when I walked by. But no one asked questions. They just looked at me differently. Sophia texted daily. Marcus brought dinner and didn't push. Even silence felt like safety. And yet, under all that motion, a stillness I didn't expect. Not triumph, not regret, just a hollow kind of quiet. Like something had finally broken open and was waiting to see what would grow in its place. James showed up unannounced. 3:00 p.m. Unshaven shirt, wrinkled, not his usual polished self. "Can I come in?" His voice was lower than I remembered, almost uncertain. I nodded, said nothing. He sat across from my desk, elbows on knees. "Dad hasn't left the house," he said. "Cancelled his golf trip, ignored the board, won't take calls." I didn't react. It wasn't my problem anymore. "He watched your USB," James added. "The video, all of it." I looked at him, waited. He made us watch it too, me and Thomas, twice. Something moved in my chest. Not forgiveness, just recognition. James looked down at his hands. "I didn't know, Liz. About your work. The awards, the impact, you never asked," I said quietly. He nodded. "I know." I didn't plan to check it, but that night I opened my personal inbox out of habit, or curiosity, or both. Subject line, "I'm sorry, sent at 2:13 a.m. from my father's private address." 2 sentences. "I saw everything on the USB, I was wrong. Can we talk when you're ready? No explanation, no justifications. Just silence, wrapped in words he'd never used before. I read it twice. Then closed my laptop. My chest felt tight, not in pain, but in pressure, like something was shifting. I didn't reply, didn't know if I ever would. But I sat there in the quiet longer than I meant to, holding a kind of grief that wasn't about loss but possibility, and the strange unfamiliar weight of being heard. I booked a flight to Singapore, no announcement, no forwarding address, just a name on a consultation request from a luxury developer and an excuse to disappear. The ocean between us felt like safety, like breathing room. 3 days in, while reviewing plans in my hotel room, an alert pinged on my phone. Mitchell Corp launches green architecture division. I blinked, read it again. Richard Mitchell had postponed his retirement, was personally overseeing the initiative. The press release quoted him, "Building should serve both people and planet. We've ignored that too long." My hands trembled slightly. It wasn't just the division, it was the language. It sounded like me. Before I could process, my phone rang. "Thomas," out of breath. "No greeting? You saw it, right?" he said. "Because it's all because of you." 2 weeks after I got home, a package waited at my door. No label, just his return address in small, careful letters. I let it sit untouched for 2 days. Then one quiet morning I opened it. Inside, a roll of blueprints, tied with a black ribbon. No note on top, just a simple label, Franklin Community Center. I unrolled them across my dining table. It wasn't corporate, not industrial. A public space. Warm, open, human. His handwriting filled the margins. Questions about sunlight, airflow, sustainable materials, accessibility, and underneath a letter handwritten again. He called it a first attempt at making amends. Said it was Mom's hometown. Said he remembered her dream of giving back. He asked, not demanded, if I would consider offering my opinion. No expectations. Just the words, "When and if you're ready, I'm here." We met at Lakefront Cafe. Neutral ground, no memories. I arrived early, chose a table by the window, ordered a cappuccino to steady my hands. He walked in right on time, same suit but smaller somehow. Not physically, just less certain. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, standing awkwardly. I nodded to the seat across from me. We sat in silence until his coffee arrived. Then I spoke first. "The community center, it's a good idea." Relief flickered across his face. "It needs work," he admitted. "I've been reading, but I don't know what I'm doing." I looked at him, really looked. He didn't try to fill the silence, didn't try to win. He was just there. And for the first time, so was I. He stirred his coffee slowly, like he needed something to do with his hands. "I've watched your video 17 times, he said, then gave a small, crooked smile. I counted. I didn't smile back. Not yet. He went on. "I was wrong. About architecture, about what matters, about you." His voice caught just once before he pushed through. "Your Lakefront Commons project? That's legacy, Sarah. You built something that changed lives." I stayed quiet, trying to trust the moment. "What changed you?" I asked. He paused, then said, "Your note, about vision and heart. Your mother once said the same thing, that I was so busy building an empire I couldn't see we're building a better world." And for the first time in my life, he sounded not like my father, but like a man finally learning how to be one. We talked about the project next. The budget, the location, the timeline he'd sketched out in pencil. He didn't oversell, didn't lecture, just asked questions, listened. When the conversation paused, he looked at me steadily this time. "I'd like you to lead the design," he said. "No strings, your vision, your call." I studied him, searched for the usual edge, the pressure, the hook. It wasn't there. "And if I say no," I asked, "then I'll find someone else," he said, "and still thank you for meeting me." I nodded slowly. The silence between us felt different now. Less like a wall, more like a doorway. "I'll review the plans," I said, "professionally. That's all I can offer right now." He nodded. "It's more than I deserve." And this time, I believed he meant it. We started meeting twice a week. No titles, no history, just plans on paper and questions in the margins. He asked about solar orientation, thermal mass, natural flow. I gave honest answers. He didn't argue, didn't try to correct me. Sometimes he took notes in pencil. I redesigned key areas, opened the layout, added shared spaces, folded in the light where it was needed most. He listened. Actually listened. When I spoke, he didn't look past me or through me. just at me. It was unfamiliar, unsteady, but real. We weren't rebuilding the past. We were building something new, floor by floor, drawing by drawing, and for the first time, he let me lead without asking if I knew what I was doing. Thomas invited me first. Just dinner, he said. Nothing big. I almost said no, but something in his voice, soft, unsure, made me say yes. Their house hadn't changed. Same dining table, same framed photos of football games and business wins. But this time there was a seat for me. Not added last minute, not folding, just mine. James and his wife were already there. Dad, too. He looked up when I walked in. Glad you made it, he said. No performance. No tone. During dinner, conversation was cautious. Familiar paths avoided. Then Rebecca Thomas's wife asked about my latest project in Tokyo. Before I could answer, Dad spoke. Her design cut energy use by 30%, he said. It's brilliant. You should see the rooftop system. Everyone turned to look at him, then at me, and I realized he wasn't defending me. He was proud. The groundbreaking was quiet at first. Local officials, a few reporters, a small crowd gathered under gray morning light. The sign read, Margaret Carter Community Center. Dad stood beside me holding a ceremonial shovel, hands steadier than I expected. Would you like to say a few words? He asked, his voice low, not pushing, just asking. I nodded. I stepped up to the mic, took a breath, looked out at the lot behind me, just dirt now, but already something more. This center is about foundations, I began. Not just the concrete we'll pour, but the human ones, the kind that build families, neighborhoods, and second chances. I spoke of mom, of community, of what it means to make space for others to become who they are. When I finished, the applause was soft, but it was real. And when I stepped down, my father met my eyes and didn't look away. After the ceremony, he handed me a small box. Unwrapped, no ribbon. Just cardboard, aged and soft. I found this in storage, he said. Your mother kept it. Inside a model house I'd built at 7. Popsicle sticks. Aluminum foil for solar panels. A green paper rooftop garden. Crooked. Imperfect. Still standing. She said you had vision, he added, before I knew what that meant. I held it gently like memory in my hands. Like everything we'd lost and slowly rebuilt. We stood there, shoulders not touching, but no longer a mile apart. He looked at me and said, thank you for not giving up on yourself, or even on me. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't victory. It was healing. Sometimes the most powerful way to be seen is simply to never stop showing up. If you've ever had to prove your worth to someone who refused to see it, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments. I read everyone. And if this spoke to something in you, hit subscribe. More stories are coming, not about being perfect, but about becoming who we were meant to be.